evening. Welcome to another video. And today I'm with Sadibou Kamaso, a great guy. We're just going to have a conversation and see what he's thinking or his thoughts on African football and everything. And it gives us his honest opinion about everything. So here we go. Hello, Mr. Kamaso. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Mr. Tony.
Yeah, how is Gambia? How's everything in Gambia?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's rainy season in Gambia this time. We have a Sahelian type of weather. We have dry season from November till May, and then from June to October is rainy season. So rainy season just started, and the temperature is a bit higher, about 32 degrees. But
Oh,
otherwise, yeah.
okay. That's really nice. Uganda, the same thing. We have a rainy season too here. It's just that it has gone down a bit, but we're still experiencing the rain. For us, our starts in March until late July.
I prefer Ugandan weather to Gambian weather. I studied in Uganda, so I know what the
Oh,
weather is like.
yeah. Okay, so that means that you literally know everything about Uganda.
I know Kampala. I used to go to Cavendish University, and I used to stay in Bunga. I've lived in
Oh,
Wandagea, so I know
hey.
Kabalagala, Moyenga. You know,
Actually,
you know.
you know Kampala better than me.
So those areas I used a lot because uni was in Sambaya in around Kabalagala. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So I just want to welcome you to Footy Africa. And before we get started, I just want you to tell everyone just what you think, what your thoughts and opinions are about the beautiful game in the African continent, especially in Gambia.
Thank you, Tony. Well, football, in my opinion, should be used as a vehicle that can drive, social and economic changes in the, African, environment. In the sense that, football development we've seen of recent has brought in so many positive changes in the lives of players. Well, not only just their lives, but the social realities of the areas where they come from. And the football ecosystem is, forever evolving. And in my opinion, African football has to start, doing the best it can so that it can, keep up with the pace at which football is progressing. European football has gone, you know, to the next level. And we should be able to do a lot more to be able to reach that level so we can compete. What the situation now is, a lot of young people, do the best they can so they can go and play in the European leagues. But it's my honest opinion, it's my fervent belief that African football should be able to reach that level where people would not only think of playing in the international leagues but also in their local leagues, because football can bring in a lot of employment amongst the young, and it can reduce the crime rate when people are getting paid and then getting themselves occupied with the game, because there's nothing more beautiful than doing what you love and getting paid. So it is my belief that African football should be able to get to the level where a lot of young people will get off the streets. It can stop illegal migration, and people can get themselves occupied doing something that they love.
Yeah, that's true. That's really nice. Football is like the beacon of hope for a lot of young people. They see that if they concentrate on football, they can make it big and they can help their families, remove their families from poverty and just make a big social impact to the society and the culture they come from. You know. So what you're saying is really true. And in Africa, we really have to put up or pull up our socks. We are really struggling, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. What are your thoughts? Why is football struggling at the moment in Sub-Saharan Africa?
I
If
believe it
is
has
it
not been
just
given. I believe it has not been given the attention it deserves. I'm not just talking at the level of the administrators, because the administrators will try to do what they can, but at the level of the fans. because in modern football, the two most important people are the athletes and the fans, because they are the people who generate revenue. If there's no revenue in football, football is beyond entertainment. Okay? If you're not generating revenue, which means people get bored easily and then they start doing other things. So it is my opinion that, talent alone cannot be used to determine or to say African football is developing. Because when our national teams play in the AFCON or they go to the World Cup, then they say football is developing in that part. No, the whole football ecosystem deserves, to transform, to be able to accommodate all these young people, so they can make, decent living. you know it's the same way like people decide to get into the banking industry and have a career to get to the next level or become successful businessmen. That's the same way people should get into football. But then you realize they get into football and there's no mechanism in place or very little that can help them survive life after football. And it's more than just coming and playing. So for me, I believe that it deserves a lot more attention. Of recent, you've seen the Football Foundation for Africa in Kenya, headed by an individual called Brian Wasala, who's doing a good thing. Every year there's the Africa Football Business Summit in Kenya now. They've done two, and the third one is coming up this year. It brings about people who are involved in football, from administrators to coaches and every other stakeholder in football, to sit down and try to devise mechanisms that will bring sustainability in African football, because that is what is lacking in African football. Imagine in a country where I come from, you bring in replica jerseys. Fans will still, instead of buying the replica jerseys for the club to grow, fans will be asking people, or they'll be begging club administrators to give them jerseys. You go to stadium, instead of people paying tickets, they'll rather scale the fence. But people will pay their money to go and watch the Premier League, in a video club. So it involves a mindset change where people can see that we need to bring in sustainability mechanisms so our football can benefit not just the players but even those who watch the game, because everybody who plays a part has a stake. So that is the idea that I feel should be brought into football, so people can play different roles for the whole ecosystem to move further, and then they can accommodate everyone.
Yeah, okay, that's right. But also, I wanted to add something. Yeah, you're saying that the fans have play like the bigger part, but I I personally follow football in Africa, especially in the Sub-Saharan Africa, and if you look at how sometimes sometimes some clubs and the way they operate and the way the players they treat their players and everything, it's kind of different. It even gives the player, not if a player is talking about the club mistreating him to people who are supporting that club, the morale for these fans who are supporting the club, it goes down. So mostly, yeah, you're saying the truth. This the many footballers, the fans have to come to the pitch. They have to put in more effort in supporting. But also the clubs need to be transparent and they should treat these players very well, because again that is the most important thing. If we are treating these players right, because players themselves, if they are being treated like, they bring more people to the pitch to watch them play. That's the other thing. If they are really motivated to the right cause, they are being paid well, they are being paid on time, it makes things much easier, like for the league to grow. I can give you an example. At the moment in East Africa, uh, the Tanzania Premier League, the league in Tanzania has grown to the heights that it wasn't been. Like the Kenyan Premier League was really on top, but at the moment the Tanzania Premier League is bigger than Kenya Premier League, because they have really invested in the players and they are really trying to bring in more people, to bring in players who, and they're paying the players well. That's why the league is growing. And I think that is one of the most important things that clubs are not trying to do, especially if you come here in Uganda. I know you've been here in Uganda. I don't know much about the football in Gambia, but the same thing, because I have friends in Ghana who say the same thing. The league is shaky. All clubs are the same, because you won't find a club that isn't, players aren't say the same thing. We are not being treated like, the money is not coming at the right time. So it kills the morale of the players. So even if the fans have to come to the field, the clubs also have to do the right thing. They have to pay their players on time so that they can produce the beautiful game that these fans can come and watch on the stadium, or they can subscribe on their TVs and watch. I think that's the most important thing.
Tony, it is my belief that wanting to run a football club doesn't run a club. Being able to run a football club is what runs a club. I hope I'm making sense. Just because you want to run a football club does not run a football club. But being in the position to run a club is what runs a club. And that is one thing that is affecting most of the clubs in Sub-Saharan Africa. Because people just get up and then they decide to run a club. Because if you're setting up a club, I mean, the leadership of that club, there should be a vision. And when there's a vision, there has to be a roadmap. And when there's a roadmap, you have to have the tools that you're going to use to get you to your vision. And everybody joining the club, every member, whether it be the players or the staff or the fans, should know what the vision of the club is. They need to have an idea. Like we see in Arsenal, everybody knows they play attacking football, they play entertaining football. That's the philosophy of the club. Okay? So if you have a leadership that understands what they have to do, because leadership, is an entrustment that must be that must be, you know, it involves being, somebody who has humility. Leadership is an entrustment that has to be discharged with humility, humanity, and the unrelenting will to leave a legacy. Because if you do not have that with the vision of the club, it is difficult. That is where we have these issues of players not being paid. We understand clubs would struggle. Clubs would struggle sometimes with financial issues. We see clubs in Europe that struggle sometimes with financial issues, and then sometimes they get to relegation. But because people are not putting that much attention in African football, and the sincerity is a bit lacking, it is affecting it. In Northern Africa, the clubs are paying their players, they're paying them decently because there is that respect for the players. That is why I said in modern football, everyone talks about it now. The fans and the players are the most important. You need to engage the fans because they bring in revenue. The players also bring in revenue. But most of the clubs in Africa are not connected to their fans. You go and watch a game in Morocco or in Egypt or Algeria, you see like a grown-up brings his child, an 8-year-old, he sings all the songs of the club. That is very rare in Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, their games are full. You mentioned Tanzania. In Tanzania, mostly it's Simba and Yanga. I've watched the game in Tanzania. When Simba and Yanga are playing, that's a derby. Everybody's there. It's full to capacity. Other clubs like Azam are doing well now. But if it's the other teams, they're struggling. And you see there's a big difference. There's a big gap between those. So which means there's a problem there as well. Okay? There is an issue that needs to be tackled. What do we need to do? Clubs need to be professional. Being professional doesn't mean that you need to employ the staff and have those different criteria CAF has, put in place now. It is beyond that. It is putting sustainable mechanisms that would ensure that everybody has a role to play and everybody goes home happy. But if you put in mechanisms where some go happy and some don't, because we have this culture in Africa where elders do not get, nobody gets to ask them questions, or people allow them to do things, or people who are high up in political positions would use clubs to get into political positions and then dump the club, it becomes a problem. So the football ecosystem needs to have a, a sort of a, you know, what's the right word? There should be a system where, clubs or the member associations should all agree to it that this is what we need to have in place, even when it comes to transfers. Paying players in Sub-Saharan Africa is a huge problem. How many professional leagues do we have? You see CAF banning some member associations from playing, the international matches at home. If you ask me, that would not have been my approach to it, because CAF supports every member association with a certain amount of money every year. If I had the powers, what CAF would have done was to say the money we are going to pay you, if your stadium will cost you this much and that will cost that will be the amount that takes you 10 years for you to get your fees from CAF. We'll take that money, come and build you a stadium, and ensure we have a monitoring and evaluating system that ensures that stadium is being looked after. So all the benefits you're supposed to get from CAF would have gone to get that stadium. So Uganda, for instance, would not have to go and play in Tanzania. But now you know the Nambole Stadium is okay. Gambia has been banned. You understand? Those things would not fix football. Banning countries or banning their stadium would not fix football. In my opinion, the approach should be different. The amount of money you're giving them, bring the money, build them the stadium if you can. They have stadium, use that money and develop that stadium. It's, that is another system that, because it's the leadership sometimes. Some of the people do not have the vision, and some of the people who are even there probably have, modicum understanding of how football is governed. So they feel it's just to come run the club, pay the players, sell the player, get the money, enjoy some of it, and put some back in the club. No, there are no innovative mechanisms in place. So it is leadership with vision, have a roadmap, and the proper tools. Then you start monitoring and evaluating to ensure that what you've discussed is there, and then there's a level playing ground in every African country.
Okay, that's right. Well said. Again, when we leave that, again we look at the football on the grassroots levels, and you are a leader there. I've seen you. You've been trying to develop young talent from the grassroots levels in Gambia. What do you think that needs to be done, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, as we are talking? What needs to be done so that we can grow? When I talk about Sub-Saharan Africa, I exclude South Africa because South Africa is like they have problems too, but they are a bit different. Like they are on another level compared to other countries in the Sub-Saharan. So, what do you think we can do so that we can maybe have the same academies they are in maybe South Africa or in Egypt or in Tunisia? What do we have to do in Sub-Saharan, like to have the same kind of schools or academies where we can train young talents to develop and become professional football players in the future?
Good. It's not a one size fits all approach or a one size fits all solution, because different clubs have different approach, or sorry, different countries have different structures in place. One thing that I do know that in most of the sub-Saharan countries, there's lack of infrastructure. Well, there's probably no infrastructure. If you look at grassroots football in sub-Saharan Africa, it is way behind the other countries like European standards. You go to these academies, there are no structures. It's not just the structure. The feeding system, the education system. There needs to be an improved investment in terms of infrastructure and capacity. When the people who are training these young players understand what they have to do, they are able to take it to the next level. You can have the infrastructure, and the people who are manning this infrastructure or the people who are training these players do not have the capacity. You do not go. I keep saying this. Most of the African leagues are as good as the level and understanding of their coaches, because the coaches' knowledge, their understanding of the game is modicum. With due respect, we have a good number of coaches in Africa now that have done their CAF, A, B, C, and all those. But a good number of them are lacking. And in other countries, some people just get up and then they set up an academy when they do not have the know-how. Just because you have a lot of young people in the neighborhood, so they decide to set up an academy, and the academy struggle. And then there is no pathway, no clear pathway between these grassroots clubs and the international clubs or the senior clubs. Because a lot of grassroots clubs or a lot of grassroots academies will build players. You know about training compensation and solidarity mechanisms. How many grassroots clubs are benefiting from it in Africa? Very few. Very few. Because if you train any young player between the ages of 12 to 21, by the time they sign their first professional contract, 5% of that amount is withheld and it is shared amongst those clubs. So they all benefit from it. And then the solidarity mechanisms follows the player anytime they change a new club. A certain amount is withheld. But how many clubs? Because grassroots clubs do not keep data. People lack the knowledge and understanding. They do not profile their players. They don't keep data. You have an academy, 5, 6 years, kids just keep coming. You have no data. By the time the kid signs a professional contract, you start looking for your papers to claim training compensation here and there. If you do not have proof, you do not benefit from it. So infrastructure, human capital, and people need to have the understanding of what they are doing so they can put the systems in place. People just need to understand the game. Once they have the infrastructure, the investors would come in. Because some people want to invest in business, but what they see is not eye-catching enough. It's not enticing enough for them to invest their resources into it. So you need to have the proper structure and then the proper human capital. When you know this is what you get from it, when a player is sold, this is how much you get from it, then the investors will start investing in it, and the big clubs will start having their own academies, because a lot of African clubs are looking at getting the players when they're a bit older, and then they transfer. Even transfers in big clubs is a problem in Africa. I have that experience where you want a player from another African countries to transfer them to Europe. Their president will not pick your calls, or they don't respond to text messages, or they'll tell you they'll call you back and they don't call you. And so infrastructure, capacity building, and then have a good pathway from the academies to the clubs where their progress could be tracked. Then anytime there's something that the academies or the grassroots clubs can benefit from, they can easily access.
Yeah, that's very right, Mr. Kamaso. You've just nailed you've just put the nail on the head. It's true. Most of our academies here, they lack data, and even if a big player comes from that academy, sometimes they don't even benefit anything. The only thing they'll remain with is that player came from us. That's
Exactly.
what I've seen with most academies here. That's what they do. Going to another topic. This is just what I want to know from you. Who are the figures you think who are really trying to push the football landscape? They are trying to grow the football landscape in sub-Saharan Africa. Who are the figures that you look at and you're like, yeah, these people are really trying to do it, and we should look at them and listen to what they have to say?
Well, I think different people. There are quite a number of people. Okay, some would I would say it depends. There's some who are pushing at the level of administration and some who are pushing at the level of technical and stuff like that. So quite impressive. I mean, I've seen people like the likes of the president of Mauritanian Football Association, Ahmed Yahya. I mean, he came in as president of the federation when Mauritania has not won a game for I think 14 years, and when he took over, he made some tremendous changes, huge transformations. They built a stadium, built a training facility, built a new complex in there, and Mauritania has now started, participating in the AFCON. So he's someone who's done well. He's someone that I think has vision. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of people. Samuel Eto'o came in, and you see, I mean, he's got money. There are other African players who've got money. I mean, they could have done, decided just to go and do other things, but he came in and decided to become president. But you still see that, there are some external forces that would try to fight, but he's been tenacious. He's remained steadfast, to make things happen. The good thing is he's an ex-player, and that is something for me that is quite impressive. I'm not a fan of people being in power for too long. With all due respect to them, to say okay, there are certain things that I've started. You can't finish everything. Like I said, vision, roadmap, and tools. So I mean, Ahmed Yahya for me is someone who really stands out, because he's just around the corner from the Gambia. It's Mauritania. You look at their story. That is why it stands out for me. Before he took over, they really struggled, and now that he's in position, his country's doing well, and they're producing a lot of players. You know, at the level of grassroots football, Senegal is also doing well. You have the Augustin Senghor, the likes of Madi Toure, and them. These people have their own academies. Now you have the likes of Demba Ba also establishing their academies. The likes of Sadio Mane, setting up infrastructure in their country to make things happen. It's doing good. Even your country. I've seen, I keep saying this, maybe some people might disagree with me. They may not be doing well at the level of at the senior level in terms of international football, but I come there and so most of the things that I see that they are building up in the next 5, 10 years, would yield a lot of dividend because there's been a lot of transformation. Sometimes, because of politics, we see things from a different perspective and we do not see eye to eye. We tend to disagree. But at the end of the day, I think the interest of the greater good, should be what should supersede. So definitely, I mean, there are quite a number of people. If I want to start naming them, but like I said, in terms of administration, for me, Ahmed Yaya, really stands out. And Samuel Eto's tenacity and his resilience, is another thing that I really admire.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. I agree with you with Mauritania because he has really pushed the boundary, like from where they were 15 years ago to where they are now. It's like really they have achieved a big, and he's really trying to push to develop football in the country in Mauritania. So you're right. And about Samuel Eto'o, true, he has really done it. Except recently when there were some wrangles after the Afcon, but he really stood tall and he's trying to also push football in Cameroon. We can see, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years, football is going to be different in Cameroon, not
Certainly.
as we see now. And the other person is also Drogba. I think
Oh,
Drogba
yeah.
is trying to also push football in Africa to the next level because I see him in different events regarding African football, and also another player who recently, the Brentford player from Nigeria, Frank Onyeka.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something like he wants to build an academy plus he wants to build a football club in his hometown. So it is really big, and I think what they are trying to do is trying to bring the knowledge from Europe and trying to put it here in Africa, and they try to push the
But
boundaries
with all of
almost
that,
like
if we do not have the right policies in place that people would respect, it becomes the problem. We can do all of these, but the policies in place should be things that people respect, and then they play ball. Because if we don't, you can establish your academy, and then you get frustrated by some of the policies that are in place, and then you get discouraged, and then you move away. So for me, the
yeah.
policies in place need to they need to be well defined, and people get to understand them. Because sometimes you feel certain things are done with so much impunity, and you wonder why these things are being allowed. Because there's this notion that if governments interfere, FIFA will ban you. I mean, there's what they call negotiated autonomy. It's not like FIFA would only ban a country when government interferes at the extent of trying to change, the people who are voted into office and things of that sort. But in terms of how resources are managed and the promises that you're making, there should be a mechanism in place that would ensure that if you collect funds on behalf of your country to be able to change, you should go and make those changes. Because most of these countries sometimes they depend on aid to do certain things. When you can get some of the resources, you depend on aid, but you see the people who are collecting the aid are doing, like there's a stark contrast between them and what the aid is meant for. So you wonder, do they really need aid, or do they need to put in proper mechanisms that would ensure the football moves? When there's a will, there's a way. That is what I believe.
Yeah, you are right. That's the major thing actually. Transparency lacks in sub-Saharan African football. Like there is no transparency at all. A lot of people, they get the aid, then they transfer the aid somewhere else to their personal lives. And again, the other thing is, this is just thing. I was talking to Chris Bullock in the morning today, and we were having a
Great guy.
nice
I
discussion.
met
I
him at the
think,
Africa Football Business Summit. Yeah, great guy.
yeah, a very
He's got a
great
lot
guy.
of stuff.
Yeah. So we were talking about this thing, like a recent story that just came out about Yanga and Bechem United. So Yanga has not paid the money that they owe Bechem United. They bought a player about $100,000. and Beckham took them to FIFA, and I think they were banned or something from purchasing players again. So, and there is a video that came out in the morning from an administrator in the Tanzanian league. It was like these things are happening because clubs are in debt. And I was talking to Chris, and Chris was saying, most of the clubs right now, we are trying to imitate what clubs in Europe are doing. We are trying to give promise players contracts. Try to tell them that we can offer you this, yet we don't have that money to pay, and we bring in players, expensive players, we can't pay them, and we end up maybe getting these bans. Is this the right? Is this the real? The is this the thing that is going on, or there is something else?
If the clubs do not have a business model, Tony, then they have a problem because football is business. I was in Turkey a couple of months ago, and there's a big club in Turkey that needed a player from a big club in Tanzania. I contacted a friend of mine who lives in Kenya but used to play in Tanzania. He gave me the number of the team manager. I spoke to the team manager. He gave me the number of the president. The president wasn't picking calls. There's a club that would want a player from your club, and you're not picking calls. You understand? So I'm like,
Yeah.
are you ready to do business? Even if you don't want to do business, pick the call or respond to my message. I've sent the person a message and said, my name is Sadibou Kamaso. I work with Sportlex Agency, and this is what we do. We've transferred so and so and so player. There's a club, in Turkey. I was there, and they told me, Sadibou, can you contact them now and find out how much they need for the player? What's the situation for the player? They were not picking my calls, and they would read the messages. In fact, after the team manager who I had spoken to was not even picking my calls afterwards, and I'm thinking, do they really want to do business? Even if you don't want to sell the player, pick and say, okay, sorry, the player is not available. Maybe we can offer you another player. But you decide not to talk to me. Someday you might need a player from me. So those are some of the things that are impeding African football. Because in Europe, they'll talk to you and say, the player is not available for sale, or these are the conditions, we can offer you the player on loan, or whatever. You discuss, and then you find common ground, and then you progress. But I'm telling you, this is something, I have all the proof, I have all the messages on my phone. And it's a big club in Tanzania. So you wonder, how do we intend to develop the football when you are not even communicating? Because monies are made in football through transfers, gate takings, sponsorship deals and stuff. How many sponsorship deals do we get in Africa? So if you can transfer a player and get decent money, why would you not communicate? It still baffles me. I was at the Africa Football Business Summit, and I spoke to a few, club CEOs that told me, "Oh, if you give us this amount, you know, we'll give you the player." And that was something that, was like heartwarming for a CEO to tell you that. But then you're calling other clubs, and then they like, because the club asked me, they said, "We want this player. Can you find out what it is?" They were not talking to me, and I'm an African. I should be able to do the deal. So I told my Italian partner. My Italian partner told me, he says, "Sadibou, if they're not talking to you, then I will not talk to them," because they should be able to talk to their fellow Africans. And I said, I totally respect that. But so tell me, you know,
Yeah, that's the other aspect again of African football. They fear that they are going to lose maybe their best player, and if a chance like that comes, this player is going to want to leave because they want to go and play in Europe. And it's really sad, such to hear such things, especially from a person. You are on the ground, you experience how business, how the transfer, you make transfers between Africa and Europe, or maybe other parts of the world. You see these things a lot happen. And do you think it is right, these people, they are trying to do this, even if they answer your call and they say that they can't give you a player, and maybe a player wants to leave, because sometimes there are players who really want to leave and they cannot leave. Yeah, are they doing the really the player well, or it is they should like how is, because I know it is a problem. What I'm trying to ask is what
Is it right to keep
can
the
they
player
change?
against their own will?
Yeah, what can like is can CAF like try to interfere in this, or maybe the country mini federation trying to interfere in this so that clubs can
No.
maybe do this?
A
So
contract is a
how
contract.
can this?
A contract or an
Yeah,
agreement is a contract or an agreement that is legally binding between two parties. Okay? And the contract should have a termination clause. Or in football, there should be a buyout clause. Okay? Like, for instance, if you have 3 or 4 more years left in your contract and you want to leave now, there should be an amount that you can buy out the rest of your contract. So even if the player is your best player, in my opinion, Africa at this point is, especially Sub-Saharan Africa, is we're in a situation, we're in a position where we develop players. If you ask me, I could sell that player, and I could develop a lot more players, or I could buy another player in Africa who could possibly play that sort of position, and that could help me balance my books, where I do not have to suffer or struggle with playing my other players. Because at the end of the day, you do not get as many fans as you would get in a European match. So you weigh your options and see, this is where we can make money from player transfers or pitch rental or sponsorship. But the strength of African football is player transfers, because Sub-Saharan Africa does not get that much fans unless it's a derby between two big teams. Okay, so if you have that, you can engage the player, or you put it in the player's buyout clause. You can even increase the buyout clause at that instance to tell that club, this is how much we're selling the player for, or we cannot offer you the player now, we can offer you the player in a year. All of those things are discussions. You should be in business, you should be able to discuss. You do not shun the person, or don't even not even discuss or avoid. And the player, like I said, should have a termination clause or a buyout clause. CAF cannot intervene unless, or FIFA can only intervene when the player's rights are being infringed, and the person has to make a complaint. But if his rights are not being infringed, he's being paid what he's due. If he wants to terminate his contract, there should be a termination clause there, because it's not a one size fits all. But in my opinion, I thought, the club, well, I still think the club should have communicated to say, okay, the player is not available now, or this is the buyout clause for the player. So in case the club needs something from you again, they can do business. But if that's the approach, even if they need another player from you, they can say, oh, we don't want, this is how they treated us, you know?
Yeah, so that is right. This again, this is an interesting path to take. You are in the executive committee of the Gambia Football Federation. So,
I used to be,
what do you used to be? At the moment, you're not
yes.
there.
No,
Okay,
from
so like
2018 to 2022, yes.
from 2018 to 2022. So
Yeah.
like what like are the solutions, like we can say these are the right solutions we can like put in the football leagues so that they can move forward and grow and maybe reach a level where they are sustainable, and we are doing business on the right way. We are taking players outside Africa. Our leagues are in a better place. Like, what is the most important thing? If you've talked about infrastructure and bringing the funds in, but I believe there are some things that are missing. Like the transparency. It's a
Yes.
major thing. Is also that is bringing in more problems. But what, in your thoughts and opinions, what do you think that is the thing that we should start on to take our football higher?
Are you talking about in the context of the Gambia or African football in general? Sub-Saharan Africa.
Sub-Saharan Sub-Saharan football in general.
Well, a good some countries are doing quite well in terms of trying to get their leagues well developed. I think there's a need for sensitization and community, as well as fan engagement, because they are the people that can bring you revenue. Okay. Now, in order to get good sponsors, you need to have a good business model where the sponsors can, you know, see the benefits that they can get from sponsoring your league. And to do all of that, you should be able to have a very good marketing structure. You need to have the right infrastructure so you can put those games on TV so they can look decent for people to watch. If you do not have the right infrastructure, the pitches don't look decent, you cannot put them on TV and you expect people to watch them. And if you're trying to sell any sponsorship package to the sponsor, you have to be able to show the sponsor data, to show them what they can make from this, the number of fans that visit, that come and watch, the number of fans that watch online. You need to show them data. African member associations need to invest in data, because if you don't, that is what sells. Because without the data, I mean, the banks would not. The banks know their clients. They know how much money they make. So you come as a member association, oh, we want you to sponsor our league, and they'll ask you, what do we get? They don't just want their logo to be on the TV. I mean, they also want maybe customers to come and bank with them, or the clubs to come and bank with them probably, and bring them money. Because if it's just to put their logo on TV, they can do that themselves. Why would they give you that money? So there has to be mechanisms like good business models that can entice these people. And the clubs also need to put in sustainability mechanisms that would ensure that the clubs can grow gradually. I said this earlier, one thing to run a club does not run a club. Being able to run a club is what runs a club. A lot of investors are holding back their money because of the issues of transparency, as you've mentioned. You invest your money, 2, 3 years down the line, the club has gone south. Nobody can tell you anything. You do not have the right things in place, and they cannot even give you proper accounts. And it discourages the investor. But when you're transparent, then the investor can see that this is what I get. There's data. It's good. So have the right infrastructure in place. And another thing is grassroots football investment. There should be investment in grassroots football, and then create a pathway for these grassroots clubs or the players to transition from the grassroots club they are to the bigger clubs. When they get to that level, you know that they've transited from here to there. So every other club benefits from. But you realize in Africa, even most of the academies that develop these players don't benefit anything. Sometimes they're being transferred. Excuse me for saying this, but a dodgy agent will say, "Okay, please renounce your rights for training compensation." They just renounce the rights, and they'll tell you, "Oh, this player was not with any academy," when in actual fact, the player was with an academy, maybe in Uganda or somewhere. But you've just snatch the player from them, or you know there was no such agreement that was binding the player with that academy, or the parents were not even aware the player was with that academy. So he decides to come to you, and there's no transfer mechanism in place. So those things are things that need to be looked after, and I feel a mindset change and a paradigm shift, because the way we are running African clubs, most African clubs, um, we could do a lot more better to change the system.
That is right. That is right, Mr. So I know you've said a lot of things, and you are in the football business. You know what is going on, and what are the solutions that we can implement so that we can take the game forward and grow it to another level, another better level. So my last question, my last question. I just want you to tell people, like, what do you think? You know, what are your thoughts? Like, what can you tell people about the potential of African football to the world, like the way the game is played, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa? We are not talking about the North, the Sub-Saharan Africa. Like, what can you tell people, and what should they expect the potential of African football? I ask this because a lot of people
So Tony, African football has.
I ask
I
this.
keep saying this. I yes, I am incredibly optimistic about the future of African football. But it only takes, committed and dedicated leaders with the right policies in place for us to effect those changes to get what we want. Okay, I mean, a good number of times, there's no or very little link between the fans and the people who run football. And it is the fans who are going to bring you money one way or the other, because they're coming to watch the matches. Those who are sponsoring you want to see the number of fans that are coming, so those fans can give them business. So their voices matter, and they play a very important role. We have a lot of talent in Africa. We have a lot of talent in Africa. Investing in grassroots and having the right infrastructure in place with, the people who are managing these academies well capacitated would be a game changer, because then whatever they're learning from that level, and then they are growing. But if you do not go to a good nursery school, you do not go to a good primary school, I wonder how you're going to do, how well you're going to do in a high school or a university. So if the structures are there, the university is good, the high schools are good, the nursery and primary is terrible, you cannot get, the transition would be bad. But African football has immense potential. Just have the right policies in place, engage the community and the fans. You see, when national teams are playing, how the whole country gets up to support. Why are we not getting those, people supporting the local league matches? Because the member associations, in most cases, you know, are not in touch with the general public, and that involve has to do with clubs also trying to engage their clubs. Because sometimes you see a person owns a club, he does not even engage the community where he comes from. If you don't do that, you see the club as my personal property that I just run, I make my money, and that's it. No. There are people who will bring you money. The way you entice customers in your business is the same way you need to entice fans to bring them, establish a huge fan base, give back to the community, because football needs to give back where it crops from. If you're not giving back where you're cropping from, you're detached from the people who are doing that. So in order for us to do that, there needs to be a mindset change. Like, there should be an intentionality to get the funds on board as much as possible, have, sustainable mechanisms in place that can get the leagues growing. Because African players should be able to play in Africa and get decent salary. We're not saying they cannot go and play. You see European players that would go to even China. Okay, European players are going to Saudi Arabia now because of the money. So the players can move anywhere. But our league should be rich enough for young people to be able to get the decent salary where they're able to take care of themselves. And gradually, if that grows, more funds are coming in, those players are giving back to their societies, it will encourage a lot more people to come in.
Okay, understood. That's right. A lot of people I talk to, they always tell me Africa is the future of football. But when you're in Africa, you have a different picture and a different view. You see a lot of things are still behind and we are still lagging. But when you put it in that way, in that context, and I believe, as you said, here in Uganda, we are trying to do that. And I have also seen in Gambia there is also progress that people are trying to push and try to make it in football. So thank you a lot, Mr. Kamaso. Thank you for the chat and thank you for giving us the insight on what has to be done. Thank you very much. Before we go, where can people find you on social media?
On LinkedIn, that's the only way you can find me on LinkedIn. Sadibou Kamaso. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very
Okay,
active on
guys,
LinkedIn.
there you go. So you can find Mr. Kamaso on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, Mr. Kamaso. Thank you for your time. I hope we see you on another one. We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Webalenyo.
But before you go, do you have a team, like club that you support here in East Africa, Uganda, to be specific?
Well, I was lucky to have been given a KCCA
Yeah.
jersey by Madam. Yeah, yeah. I think I still have it. Um, I still have my KCCA jersey when I visited. Um, when I visited, yeah. So I still have my,
Yeah. Wow. You just still have it the way it is.
you know,
Still looking good.
this was, yeah, and it was given to me by Anisha Muhozi, the
Okay.
CEO.
Yeah,
You know,
that's really nice.
yeah, I went to watch. I think they were playing against Vipers. There was a match they were playing against Vipers, and I went to watch, and then they
You
gave
got the
me
jersey.
this jersey. That I was CEO for Hawks Football Club at the
Okay.
time. Yeah, I follow African football, so if I'm in an African
You
country,
have
I'll try to
watching.
to watch a league match, and
That's
yeah.
that's very nice, Mr. Kama. So I hope I catch you maybe next week. We have another chat like this, inshallah. So
No
see,
problem. So anytime.
see
Thank
you
you.
on another one. Bye.
All
Okay,
right.
guys, there you go. That was Mr. Kamaso. We thank him for his insight. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you like, subscribe, and share, and comment what your thoughts are and what you can add on or what you disagree with him. Thank you very much. See you on another one.